today our topic is communication, and we're all really, really good at it, and that's why we're all here. I really think that anybody can do a bit of a primer. I'm guessing that many of you have been to workshops on communication in the past. So it could be that you won't hear anything new, but I'm hoping that you are at least refreshed and possibly hear things from a different slant. Because as you know, we're looking at all of these things from your point of view as board members, volunteer board members of your community associations. I don't remember how many people here are living in condominiums, our board members in condominiums. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got more than I thought, about a third of you. We are going to be discussing the Condominium Act later, and I think it's a very good act. We're very lucky to have it. It's not as complicated as some states have. And there are some model ideas in the Condominium Act that I think those of you in homeowners associations will find useful. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later. The purpose of communication. We all know why we're communicating, but I'm wondering, you as board members, what would you consider to be your most useful vehicle for communicating with the owners? Just a couple of ideas. Facebook, that's interesting. Who said that? Did you say that? Facebook. What else? Email. Email.
Blast emails.
Blast emails.
Person to person.
Person to person. There are two big ones I haven't heard yet.
Newsletter.
Newsletter. What's the other one? Your annual meeting. I consider your annual meeting the biggest single opportunity for you to communicate with your owners in any given year. The others support that, but you have such a way of branding yourself as a good board of directors and as a very good community to live in that we will spend a bit of time talking about annual meetings in a different way from the way we do when we talk about actually conducting the meetings. What you want to do as boards of directors, first of all, is to keep your owners informed. You want to keep them informed about not only the basic restrictions of the association, but also what you're doing. And that means that there's another tool that you have, and that's your minutes. The Condominium Act requires that condominiums make their minutes available to owners as much as 24 months of minutes. Many boards of directors don't share their minutes at all, and you're missing a great opportunity to keep people informed, particularly if there's a possibility that something big is going to happen. The something big could be financial in the form of a fee increase or a special assessment, but it also could be a big project, like a big paving project, or you're going to be doing some major renovations to the elevators or the clubhouse. If people have your meeting minutes on a regular basis, they have been able to keep track of things. And when these big expenses occur, these big activities occur, they already know about them, and they're less likely to be unhappy about them. None of us like surprises, and your owners don't like surprises either. So do use your minutes. Another purpose of communicating, of course, is to develop community support. And there again, that's the same example. You have financial activities. You may be having a 3-year plan to upgrade the pool, to resurface the pool, to take care of the decking, and to buy furnishings for the pool. Don't have enough money to do it in 1 year, you are going to do it over 3 years. Well, all of the owners who go to the pool see all those things. They see it needs resurfacing, they see the deck needs to be taken care of, and they see it needs new furniture. If they are looking at your newsletters or they're looking at your minutes and they can see that there's a plan, they're going to be less unhappy, which means they are more happy, and they also will be able to support you as you make these long-term plans. They will see, oh yeah, I can understand now why it's not done at one time, because there are some other obligations that the association has, and for example, the board doesn't want to have to increase the fees to do all this, so they're going to phase it in. So you want to build their support. You want to have people understanding what's going on in your community so that they do support you and even possibly want to become good board members sometime in the future. You want to create a culture of cooperation and service. You are all volunteers. We say this all the time. You're the volunteer leaders. You want to be able to communicate to the owners, indeed, this culture that you as co-owners in your community are devoting your personal time, which you could be spending doing something else, on the affairs of your community. That you take this job seriously, and that you are making decisions that are responsible and definitely in keeping with the desires and the needs of your community. and you want people to know that, particularly on the board of directors itself. We're talking mostly here about communicating with the owners, but it's not going to work if you as board members don't work together. And it does start with you, the board of directors. Each year you have an election. Most of you will have a change on your board of directors each year. Some you will not. Some of you may even have a completely new board every year. Is there anybody here where you serve for only a year, only 2 years? Everybody goes off at the same time? Do you have that over yours? Yeah. Well, we have some associations like that. So can you imagine the rest of you being on a board of directors of 5 people, and all 5 of you decide in the same year that you have had it and you're not going to run anymore? It happens. And the documents are written in such a way that that means it's going to be an entirely new board instead of having it phase out. So how do you handle something like that? It's really tough. Of course, the manager is going to be here to help. But in most cases, you have people who are phasing out. You're serving for every 1 or 2 or 3 years, and every year you have somebody new coming on, somebody who has been on the board of directors coming off. How do you make that work? The first thing you do after the annual meeting is determine who your leader among you is going to be. That is, who is going to be your president. Now, I've said this before, but we're not talking about the President of the United States. This isn't an executive branch here, a person who gets out to make his or her own decisions completely independently of the other board members. We're talking about the first among equals. That's the leader in the group. And when you as board members decide who your president is going to be, choose one of you who you think can lead and will lead. Sometimes we're on a board of directors, but we're really not in a position, we're not maybe comfortable enough to lead the other people and give them direction. That's what the board members are going to look to the president for. And I know there are several board presidents here, and there are several people who have been president for several years. And the reason is that people recognize those people as leaders, and they're comfortable with that leadership. So remember that's the position of the president. Now you other board members who are not president, don't let that president go off and be an independent, some people call them a dictator. You have to, it's your job to remain informed. It's very tempting when you have a strong board president to allow that person to do everything. And what will happen is you will tire that good person out. They just get tired out because there's nobody there to help them. So your job, there again, you're working as a team, is to say, you know, I see you're doing this, you're doing the newsletter, you're delivering the newsletter, you're the one who's meeting all of the contractors to tell them where they want the flowers, da-da-da. The other board members need to say, you know what, let's share some of this responsibility. The board president doesn't have to do all of these things. He doesn't get to do it so that you all just get to sit in a room and make the decisions without contributing time. As I say, you'll burn out that good person, and then you're not doing yourselves a favor because you're really not contributing, and also you're not maybe keeping yourself informed. Agree to disagree. That's really important. And we have talked before about having a code of conduct for board members. Certainly, even if you don't adopt anything formal, do understand and discuss the fact that it is a fact that you will not always agree on everything. And because you don't agree, the fact that you don't agree does not mean that some of you are wrong. It just means that you disagree. So agree to disagree. Understand and respect each other's opinions, listen to each other's opinions. If you need to vote on it, but know that you have to carry on. And once the decision is made and you walk out of that room, everybody on that board of directors supports that decision, even if you didn't vote for it. If you don't do that, if you go out to the ownership or you even talk to other board members and say, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, I know this is going to fail. You do this kind of thing, you are undermining the legitimacy of your board of directors. You've got to stay together in a good way, always in a good way. But remembering, and you may always disagree. Using my association as an example as usual. We have somebody on the board of directors who has a philosophical problem with making any decisions outside of a physical board meeting. And it did happen a couple of months ago that the board did have to make a pretty important decision. They knew it at the board meeting and knew it had to be made before the next board meeting was going to occur, and they knew they could not meet between now and the next board meeting. So they had to make a decision by email. And this board member didn't happen to be at the meeting where the board agreed to do that by email. And there's nothing in the documents that prohibits this. So they made the decision. He had no problem with the decision, but he had a problem with the process. And this is August, and this has been going on since like last May, and it's still not resolved. He'll never be satisfied with that. I think they're probably just going to revote. I don't know what they're going to do. But the decision will be the same. But you won't always convince people. Don't think that you're out there to sell something or convince your other board members or win them over to your side. It's not that kind of thing. Just recognize that sometimes you're going to move on. He's never going to be happy with that. The other board members will accommodate him as much as possible, and certainly they will avoid email votes when at all possible. But they will move on. I mentioned the Code of Conduct. We have several samples of them. If you would like to see some of those, you're welcome to let your manager know, and then I can get those to you. And also we'll be doing that seminar again, I think, early in the year in 2012. Email protocol. I've given you something on email protocol. This is really important. Just some of the highlights. If you put somebody in the to box in your email, that means that is the person you are addressing, right? That means that you expect that's the prime person, and in some cases you may be asking for a response or some activity from that person. If you don't expect some activity and you're simply letting them know about the email, put them under CC, which used to mean carbon copy. I don't know what it means now. But anyway, carbon copy. So you're just copying them, just to let them know what's going on. Also, once you put that person into the carbon copy section, don't expect them to answer, because you've put them in there simply because you want to keep them informed, not because you want them involved in the conversation. There are some well-known things to remember, and which I didn't put in there, but remember, don't uppercase everything, because that comes across as being mad. If you're really, really mad, get up from the computer, walk away and do something and come back. But don't do that, because it really, sometimes people do that for emphasis. I had a board member who did everything in uppercase, and I got used to it. But when people would first see his emails, they would think he was really shouting at them, because as you know, that's what it looks like. So remember those subtleties. Read your email before you send it. You might have put a not in when you didn't mean to put. I did that the other day, actually, and caught it. I put a not in when I didn't even, how I ever put the not in when it wasn't supposed to be there, I don't know. It would have completely changed the meaning of the entire email. So be sure to check your email. Spelling is important. Spelling is important because, you know, those words, when they're spelled differently, have different meanings. So remember that. Don't just say, oh, spelling isn't important. Yeah, it's important, unless you're a person with text, I guess. Become knowledgeable as board members. Become knowledgeable together. It could be that some of you have specialties where you can share the knowledge. If one person is a numbers person and another person is really good at reading contracts, well, maybe when your grounds care contract comes up, that contract person will be your point man or woman for reviewing the contract and then reporting to the other board members. But if you do that, don't just let that person look at the contract and then you just accept what they say. Ask them to explain to you why they're recommending what they're recommending. There again, you've got to be knowledgeable and you've got to be participating. When you're sharing this, that means that you're sharing the business of working on it, but then you're also sharing the results so that you all grow together as board members and leaders of your community, which means you do participate. And we mentioned a little bit later, but participating, believe it or not, does mean listening, but it also means talking. Don't hesitate to give your opinion. That's why you're meeting. If you're communicating by email, that's really good. You may not want to be too lengthy in your email, but do let people know why you are saying what you're saying, why you think what you think. That's why there's more than one person on the board, because we make better decisions when we work as a group. And if you don't express your opinions in favor or against something concisely and reasonably, you may have lost the opportunity to give somebody else to bounce off that idea. You know, many times it's that idea that's way off in the corner that seems so absolutely nuts that's the one that's adopted, because when everybody hears it, they say, oh, wow, I never thought of that before. That's a great idea. Let's at least explore it. So do participate in your board meetings. If you're a president, one way to do that is whenever there's a decision being made and you've had a motion and the motion is seconded, if you haven't already had decision, do encourage discussion. Say, what do you think about this, Mary? Do you think, does anybody have any opinion? Try to draw some people out. If your president is not a person who does that, you can do that too. Make sure that there's nobody silent there. They could be the person who is unhappy, or maybe they just don't understand, and it could be that they're embarrassed, particularly if they're a new board member. They may be embarrassed to say, oh, I kind of really don't want to say that I don't know anything about pools, and you're making this big decision about salt pools, and I'm totally clueless. And that's because the only reason the board knows about it is the salt pool guy was there last month, and that person missed it. So, again, let everybody, you participate, and make sure that the people around you participate as well. Sharing your reasons, which I just said, and then as I say, once you walk out that door, support the board decisions. It's really, really important. And we have seen that where board members are not comfortable with the decision. If they find the board of directors is going in a completely different direction from what they think the board should go in, then I think that person needs to inform the board of directors of that. And if there is absolutely no way of resolving that, that board member's option is not to go out and badmouth the board's decisions. It's to really leave the board of directors. I mean, I really feel, because I feel that it is so counterproductive to the activity of the other board members. And you can usually not remove anybody from the board of directors, but certainly sometimes it's time to say, you know what, you're just not part of the team. And have you ever considered resigning? You have people who can dominate a board of directors, take them completely off course by writing minutes for a meeting that are 12 pages long, or absolutely dissecting everything, 12 by 12, and diverting the board of directors members from all the things that you really need to be doing. And at some point, you have to say, does this person really need to be here? I mean, are they really helping the team? Can they work with the team and kind of put some of this stuff aside and move forward, or they're going to be just an obstruction to us? And of course, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes they feel that this is their contribution, and you will have to work with them, and then you just work with them the best you can. The annual meeting. The reason I think the annual meeting is such a great opportunity is that it's something that everybody gets. They will open it, they may forget it, but that's that impression. I remember when the first annual meeting that they had, I had lived where I was for almost a year, was totally clueless about community associations. I had some vague notion that there were board members, and I don't know what they do. Knew there was a manager because I talked to him a couple times. That was kind of it. Well, I got this annual meeting notice, and there was a typo in it. That's what I remember after 31 years. Can you believe that? So when, I mean, that's kind of, but that's what I remember. And it was in there every year, for a year. Finally, I said to the manager, just, here's a typo. What we do for you is make sure that that's clean. We have an internal policy where every bulk mailing that goes out is checked by at least 3 people. I mean, literally read and then checked off by 2 in terms of physically signing off on it, so that we don't have the typos. But that's the minimum. You want that to say something about your community, and your annual meeting notice sets the tone for the meeting. So you want it to be businesslike, and we certainly do that for you. You want it to be inviting. Most of you have language that we've put in there encouraging people to come, to learn about the community and get to know their neighbors. If you have a social event before the annual meeting, which is a great way to draw people, that's when you're announcing it. Good things to put in with the annual meeting notice, which we do for many of you, might be the current financial statement or the most recent financial statement that the board has approved. Just the balance sheet, letting them know how much money they have in the bank. Putting in the minutes from the last annual meeting of the previous year. Sometimes they will list the board members and their telephone numbers and email addresses. Something in there that lets people know they're going to a business meeting for a community that they live in and that they should care about. Let them relate to it in some way. It's a business notice, but it does need to be right. We have some that have graphics on them, quite nice graphics, all kinds of things. Most of you, I think, we're doing the trifolds, isn't that? I think most of them like a trifold, and that has the proxy in it. And what you're doing with that is giving the perception to owners of, you might say, frugality. It used to be we sent the annual meeting notice, that was on one piece of paper. We sent a proxy in case you didn't show up. Many times sent a ballot. Then we might have a budget. You're talking sometimes 5 or 6 pieces of paper. We were assuming, I guess, these days everybody wears glasses, because now we get this on one piece of paper and fold it in 3 and send it to people, and most of that stuff is still in there. But it looks less wasteful because it is less wasteful. That's another impression that you're giving, and you're always trying. And as I say, you're not being cheap, but you're certainly not wasting your owner's money. you as board members, we as board members, have very little control over the budgets. Most of the things that are in our budgets, we are stuck with. You have roofing, you have the pool, you have the clubhouse, you have the grounds care. Everybody has grounds care, landscaping. Those things you have very, very little control over when you think about it. Where you're talking about thousands and tens of thousands of dollars every year for these items that have to be done. You cannot not do the shrubs, right? Or you're going to have very unhappy owners and the place is terrible. So what we all tend to do is to concentrate on the things that we can concentrate on, which is the copies. 12 cents a copy. We concentrate on that, and your boards concentrate on that, and that's human nature. So I think it's human nature anyway. So when you're sending out notices like this, you do want to let them know, be aware in a very real way, but a subtle way, that you're not being wasteful with their money. One of the few things you can control is the copies. And of course, we do that for you too, because for everything but the annual meeting, we're able to email, because we use our website. So of course, that's saving you a lot of money as well. And that's something that people are increasingly buying into as time goes on. The agenda. We often include the agenda in the notice, if there's room. In some cases, the meeting notice requirement includes the agenda. In some cases, you can write your own agenda, and in other cases, the documents have a particular agenda that you must follow. But there again, that's letting people know it's going to be a business meeting, and they know what's going to be happening. So if you have something that you're going to bring up that's special, maybe you as a board of directors have been working on this for months and months and months, and at the annual meeting, you're going to make the announcement. You might consider, instead of just saying board president's report, that you say something like proposal for clubhouse renovation. Something that will grab their attention and make them curious, and maybe make them want to show up at the meeting. When you're at the meeting, I'm kind of mixed. I have mixed feelings on this. Some boards of directors like to sit together at the front of the room so that all of the owners can identify who the board members are, and also see that they're there as a team working together. I like that. I also happen to like sitting back with people and chatting. So I'm mixed on that. But I really think that if your custom at your association is to have board members be dispersed all over the room, that when it comes to the meeting, one of the first things that you will do is identify your board members by name, have them stand, and have everybody see who they are. You really want to have the owners know who the board members are, not just the person who's presiding at the meeting, who is usually the president. Let them put a face to the name, because they may want to come over to you. They may want to come over to you and tell you what a wonderful job you're doing. I mean, it does happen. You're not always complaining. But so first of all, identify yourself. And by being together, the reason I like it, and not necessarily in a formal table or something, but just clustered maybe at the front of the room. If you have a room like this, if we were having an annual meeting here of some size, I would ask all the board members to sit there as the board president. And then then the owners would sit here, and we could say, and there are, I'm the president, here are our other 4 board members, here they are. And they can kind of see they're together and special. You can see they work together. Any opportunity that you have to show that you know what you're doing is good. Now that seems silly, but at the board meeting, at the annual meeting, many people are uncomfortable. They're afraid that the owners are going to pick up things and start throwing at them, and that doesn't usually happen. I suppose it does happen sometimes. But if you're going up there with great confidence, hey, you've been working on this stuff for a year. You've been on the board for a year or more, and you know what's going on. You have to communicate that to the owners. If you are standing, which you should be doing, the presider should be standing in the meeting, even if it's a small room. I'm a believer in that. I'm stuck to the microphone here, but normally, as you know, I like to walk around. Let the people see you and try to stand in a way, don't kind of do this stuff, or, try not to do this, or put your, just try to look as though you're comfortable doing what you're doing. If you're the president and you're not comfortable with that, maybe one of the other board members would like to preside for you. That's okay. Or maybe even want the manager to do it. We do that a lot, don't we, managers? We run a lot of the annual meetings for our boards, and we can do that. And there again, I'd still have the board all sit there, and the manager would say, there's your board of directors. We're really proud of them, and these are their names, and this person's going off the board, or something like that. But you guys work really hard on your communities, and I think it's nice to recognize who you are at those meetings. Cooperation is one of those things that identifies. If you're kind of off there, and if you are not sitting in one place, or even if you are, don't talk. Don't talk. Pay attention, even though you know what the president's going to say, right, or the manager, whoever's up there running the meeting, don't talk. You're the board members. If you're not paying attention, how can you expect all the other managers, the owners, to do it? Because they'll look at you and they're going to say, well, this obviously isn't important because these guys aren't paying attention. Or, well, it's obvious they don't agree with her because they're all talking. See, you know, I mean, all these subtle things that can go on. Think of yourself sitting out there, and then when you do something, think, how would it be if I'm out there? And it's kind of what you have to do all the time. You know, we're not stage people. We're not pretending to do that. You have to be yourself, but do remember that perception is so very important. At the annual meeting, please dress appropriately. Shorts are okay and all that stuff if you're in summertime. It's not that. But don't come in looking as though you've just finished working in the garden. And encourage your other board members to do that too. If you're drinking beverages, make sure that there's nothing that would suggest that you're drinking alcoholic beverages during the meeting. All right. And actually, there are probably some associations that serve wine. But I would say that during the meeting, it would be appropriate for the board members to hold off for like 40 minutes or something. And, you know, try not to drink. You know, but you know, it's just, again, it's the impression. It's a business meeting. You know, you've had your social time. The board members can, you know, let's just conduct business. Everybody else can drink wine or beer or whatever it is. But you know, try to restrain yourself for those few minutes and concentrate on being a board of a corporation, because that's what you are. Handouts. We give you handouts every time. And the reason is that we want you to take these things back to your boards of directors and share them with your other board members. That's also nice at the annual meeting. Typical handout is the budget, depending upon the time of year. Another handout that can be interesting is your community standards. And just say, hey, everybody, we're just, you notice a couple of things on the table or some things that we gave to you when you came in this evening, and one of them is the community standards or the pool rules. We know that the pool's opening in 3 weeks, and we thought that you might like to have a reminder. This will tell you what the pool hours are and so forth. So we'd like to have you take that home for you. Something that they have so that when they walk out of the door, they're going to remember more than the time it takes them to walk in their door at home. Something, again, reinforcing the business. Certainly in this day of computers, when almost everybody has a computer, almost everybody knows how to use Word or something. Even if you don't, the manager does. You can give them something that's nice and clean looking, even if you're a two-finger typer. And as I say, if you can't, there's probably somebody else on the board. So handouts are always nice. I worked with an association one time where they did that before everybody got there. They had a standard package that went on everybody's chair. We didn't know where people were going to sit, but they'd just start from the front. They'd figure they're going to have 50 people or something. And I would have to produce this package in a particular order, and they would be on those seats. I'm telling you, the first year I didn't get it right. I got the pieces right, but I didn't know there was an order to the pieces. So I used what I thought was logical, and I think it was the budget, the minutes, the last financial report, the rules and regulations, and something or other else. And anyway, the order was bad. And people were getting up. They were getting in there early. It's like looking at your church bulletin before the church starts, the service starts. And they're looking through and they said, well, where's the whatever it was supposed to be on the front page? Because it's not here. And I'd say, well, it's in there. It's in the bottom. Well, it's supposed to be right on top. So, and you can establish traditions at your annual meeting. And that's one tradition. Those people expected that. Another is food. You might always have cookies afterwards, cookies and coffee, or you might always do some particular thing. Maybe have a drawing for a yard sale, or you can create an atmosphere at the annual meeting, which you're doing. You're communicating. You've already communicated the business part. You started doing that with your notice, but you're also communicating that sense of community. Maybe that's the time you announce the garage sale or the social event on Valentine's or whatever it is. Other opportunities for communication. Many of these things we do for you, like the compliance letters. The compliance letters, some people call violation letters, but again, we always try to be positive, so we say compliance instead of violation. But the the tone of the compliance letter is very important. As most of you know, we have an introductory paragraph to our letters that tells the owner that it's nice to live in a community association, but with these nice things comes some responsibilities. So we kind of balance that. We just wanted to bring to your attention that one of the standards in the community is that the garbage can't always be put into the garage the night of the garbage pickup. And we noticed that when we were out inspecting, so we got into the real part of the letter, and that we would appreciate your cooperation and have this done whatever 2 days or whatever the standard is. And that kind of format is what we follow fairly consistently. However, as your management company, we do what you tell us to do. And I can tell you there is a range from the two extremes. There are some boards who forget the introduction, forget being nice. Hey, garbage can's out, they get a fine, tell them there's a fine, that's it, case closed. No discussion, don't give them your telephone number because it's going to be a waste of time because we're not taking the fine off. And then you get the other people and they say, don't send any letters to anybody because they're my neighbors. And some of these people are having a tough time because these are tough economic times. And I just don't think it would be right. And if garbage can would be a bad example here, but cutting the grass isn't, they say, well, you know, maybe they just can't afford to have somebody cut their grass. Well, don't send them any letters. So we're kind of in a fix and the people don't get any letters. So I can tell you what you're communicating by the lack of compliance is the fact that this whole community is just going to go like that because people won't cut their grass. And if they go away, they'll say, look, I won't bother. I'm not going to be here for 2 weeks. I won't pay somebody to do it. Who cares? I'm not going to look at it. Right? There's Bill going, yep. So you have this balance. We're trying to help you keep that balance. So listen to your managers. We're trying to communicate to you our experience. You may not agree, we'll follow what you do, but do think about that. I'll bet that on a lot of your boards you have close to those two extremes. Do you hear some of those people? They just say, just get them, find them, you know. Well, I don't care, that's the rule, give them the rules, they know what they are, they bought into it, they're tough luck, if they don't like it, they can move. Well, that doesn't build community. And it probably isn't going to get any voluntary compliance either, right? As we've said in many times at these workshops, you want people to want to live there, you want people to see a standard and want to do it, all right? You want that peer pressure to be good. You don't ever want to have people feel that something is forced upon them. Because all of us resist to that. That is human nature. We will resist it, and they will not cut the grass just because you ask them to. And there are people who will do that, which of course defeats the whole purpose. The minutes. All right, the minutes are very important. As many of you know, the minutes should be recording the business of the association. Very simply, decisions made and actions taken. Not conversation, not opinions, not all of the questions that the owners brought up at the board meeting or the annual meeting. Decisions made and actions taken. The minutes are an excellent opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, for you to communicate to owners what's going on. For example, where I live again, we have had an incredible number of water line bursts this year. And I think the manager said it's something like $40,000 extra on water, which is almost double the water bill, and that's only through August. Well, they make the minutes available to the owners. They're available, I believe they're available, Courtney isn't here, but I think they're available to all the owners online, and then they put them on the clubhouse so people can go over and look at the minutes. Anybody who's looking at those minutes knows something's going to happen in January, and it's not going to be a fee reduction. It's either going to be a fee increase or more likely it's going to be a special assessment so that we can start continuing with the painting and wood repairs. Isn't that much easier than maybe they're just subliminally they're thinking, oh, this isn't really good. Somehow they'll figure it out. The board will figure it out. And then a couple of months will go by and they say, they're still not figuring it out. These water lines are still bursting. And you just went through special assessment, didn't you? Yeah. And then, yeah, that's right. And then we have the budget letter in November, and the budget letter says, this is what's happened. We've spent $40,000 too much in water. Water department doesn't give us this money back. It's literally down the drain. We have to replenish our reserves. We are going to have a special assessment. The people who have had the minutes made available to them have pretty much already figured that out. They're not going to be as unhappy about it. They're going to pay it. I mean, they'll pay it anyway, but they will understand. They won't badger you when you're at Kroger buying the proverbial quart of milk because they'll already know the reasons, and they'll go ahead and pay it. So the minutes can be a really good tool, which means that you have to be careful what you put in the minutes. If you're just making a casual conversation about how are we going to pay for something, and somebody says special assessment, don't put that in the minutes if that's not serious. Because actually we're obligated, if you were even discussing seriously a special assessment and you're in a condominium property, the mortgage company will specifically ask us if there is any discussion of a special assessment, and we have to disclose that. So if you're just kind of throwing the idea around, and you're just like conversation, then it's just conversation. You don't need me to put it in the minutes. If you think, yeah, this is going to be a special assessment, and we're just trying to figure when and how much, then there's no problem putting it in the minutes, because that's leading to a decision. Although, since it isn't a decision, you may not want to put it anyway. But anyway, you use your minutes. Consider your minutes as a tool. We write most of the minutes for you, so we are always thinking about who is going to read the minutes. Not just the board, but also current owners and potential owners. Potential owners. And those of you who are in subdivisions, even though there is no law saying that you have to share your minutes, I will tell you that we get requests all the time for minutes from associations. A savvy buyer will want to know the condition of your community association. They don't want to be stuck with a special assessment. They want to know if the clubhouse is being maintained properly, if they've had a lot of irrigation problems, if they're thinking of closing the pool. Those are the kinds of things, how much money they have, literally how much money they have. You do have those requests all the time. For communities that are not condominiums, we will check with the board of directors to see what your policy is. There are a few boards of directors that prefer not to share their minutes, but as a policy, we really strongly recommend that you share your minutes with potential buyers. And you can do that through your owner. What you would do is say, I'm selling my house, and so my potential buyer wants to see the minutes. I would be the one to request the minutes. So we would never give them to just a casual stranger who's very curious to know. A lot of your communities, some of your communities have some pretty well-known people in them. We know we've got movie stars and singers and all kinds of people. And sometimes people find out where a famous person lives, and they want to dig the dirt and find out about their association. So we're sensitive to that, and we're not going to share that with anybody. But definitely share them with your owners. Newsletters, somebody, I think it was Jennifer, mentioned newsletters. They are great. I've got 12 tips for newsletters, one of your handouts. Some you may have thought about before, and some you may not have thought about. Not all of us are good writers. And that's okay. We can't all be good writers. So those of us who aren't good writers, find somebody in the community who is. And you make that person or those persons your newsletter committee. Now, your manager can put together a newsletter, but I don't recommend it. And it's not to keep them from doing less work. It's because we don't write newsletters as well as you do, because we don't live there. As most of you know, I've been a board member, I've been an owner, not a board member, and of course now I'm in a management company. And I will tell you that when I was the manager, I did not do the minutes. As soon as I went off the board, I would do minutes, because it's just different. We tend to be more businesslike. There's not that kind of, give and take, cozy feeling that the manager can convey. We always have to write something that's very brisk and businesslike. You want your newsletter to be full of news and nice and community and make people feel, oh, this is kind of neat. And you can put all kinds of things in your newsletters. It's really interesting. Some places list birthdays, not years, but birthdays. They might say, so-and-so, these are the August birthdays. Or sometimes some communities have a tradition where they'll find out when they have a significant anniversary, 15, 25, 50th year anniversary. Some places have yard of the month. That's very common in subdivisions. And this is when they announce it. The person has the sign in front of their yard, but in large communities, probably 3/4 of people never see the sign. This lets everybody know. Some newsletters have pictures. They might have a community event, or they might have even an event that's outside the community that a lot of people went to. They might have an owner forum where they get everybody to write a little story every month. Loads and loads of things that you can do. We have available to us something that is a great resource. We have available about, I guess there are about 50 or 60 articles that are copyright free, that are written for community association newsletters. They're available. You can get them from the manager. We have access to them on the website. I don't think that any of the board members here, some of the board members are members of CAI, and if you are, you can access this, and it's called, interestingly enough, copyright-free articles for community association newsletters and websites. And they're really neat articles. They're generic cover all kinds of things, sometimes home maintenance tips. And you think, isn't that a silly thing to put in? Well, if you're in a community that has a lot of first-time home buyers, you may have a lot of clueless people out there who really don't know very much about how to, change a washer, if they still do washers, I don't know, but some basic things in the house that they don't know. There's some things on there, things about how to explain what your fees are, conservation indoor water tips, living in a community association. And these are available, as I say. If you're not a member of CAI and you wanted access to this, we can get this. Or as you can see, it's also in book form. So this is a good idea. But use your talent that you have. As we've said before, you have a lot of talent in your neighborhood. You are the prime leaders of the association, but you've got a lot of potential leaders out there and a lot of people who can help you with the things that can make your community successful. So if you know somebody who has a writing skill or likes to write, grab them and say, could you help us with a newsletter? Because the five of us we just don't really know how to do it or how to put it together. Many times you will have somebody who knows how to write it and they don't know how to put it together to look pretty. We can do that part for you. All of our assistants are very, very good at publisher. It's publisher, is it? Yeah. Absolutely wonderful at publisher. So we can make it look good in columns and all that stuff if you just give us the copy. And there again, you've got this resource. So use that. Newsletter. It's news. It's not rules. If you're going to use it as a tool, your newsletter as a tool to communicate the community standards, which some people call rules, right? Don't devote a whole newsletter to it because that's not news. Make it a box. Make it a box. You see, I talk with my hands. Make it a box feature, and you just say, like every month, just have a little box. Did you know that that there is no food allowed at the pool? Did you know that the clubhouse is available to you and it only costs you $75? Did you know that your trash can is supposed to be in, or whatever? Just a little thing like that, and then do the news. You don't have to fill every inch of space, but you want to try to be on a regular basis. If you don't think that you can do it on a monthly basis, don't commit to a monthly basis. If you do it twice a year, that's fine. Just get something out every once in a while to let the owners know that you're out there and keep them informed as to what you're doing and what each other is doing. Word of mouth is very important. The way that you talk about your association when you are out of the board meeting is something that people will remember. Because, believe it or not, they will look at everything that you do in that community as representing the board of directors, whether you intend it to be that or not. So if you are a board member, and certainly encourage the other board members to do this, if you are a board member, please respect the community standards and abide by them. We have associations where they have very, very obviously standards where, for example, no mobile homes or trailers are allowed in the yard, and you have two board members who have these in the yard. And they'll get all mad at some owner whose license plate expired last Saturday, and today's Tuesday, and the manager says, well, what should we do about the, oh, well, it's different, because I've got a trailer, I've got a boat. No, it won't work, because that person with that license plate that just expired, why should they bother going out and get a new plate for a vehicle they're not going to use for another car? Because they know two of the board members have trailers in their yards. And there it goes. There's your downward spiral. I doubt there's anybody in this room like that, because you tend to get, you're preaching to the choir in this. But you may have fellow board members like this. So encourage them to, and you can just say it in a general discussion at the board meeting. If we're going to be administering our standards and we're going to be consistent, we have to be consistent. And we have to understand that people are looking to us for leadership and for example. It's the word of mouth and and actually I forgot I put that there, but it's word of mouth and example. It's very, very important. You get some tremendous people out here. I know most everybody here. And the things that you do for community just humble me. When I was on my board of directors, I thought I did a lot, but I'll tell you, I did nothing in comparison to what you guys do. Really, really do a lot. And you are setting the tone for your communities in a way that you just have no idea. Not only you're doing that for the community as a whole, but you're setting a standard for your board of directors. They're going to say, wow, when somebody gets on that board of directors, I expect them to be a leader. So you're taking care of your future. So when you get off the board of directors, you can have a little bit better comfort level because you can think that the people who are going to be attracted to that volunteer position are like you and will carry on that tradition of looking after the interests of the association. It's all communication. What you do, what you say, the way you comport yourself. Do listen to owners. Not all owners are easy. We are all people. Some of them don't think we're easy. Some of them think we're unreasonable. that we're too strict, we're too lenient, we don't know what we're doing, we've lived there too long, we haven't lived there long enough, we have too much money, don't have enough money, whatever it is. They went to school with the children, and the children were horrible, and so you must be horrible too. I mean, just anything. But do listen to them regardless of what they think of you, all right? And use your manager. Listen to your manager. That's a little bit down, but we have a lot that we can share with you. We like to be your advisors because we love to share this stuff. We're in this business because it's a neat business. It's a real people business. And we learn a lot from you all, and we learn a lot from all the people who aren't in the room. And we're very, very happy to share that. So if you have a question about something, ask your manager. And if your manager doesn't know, your manager can come back to the office, and he or she's going to be able to find somebody here who can find an answer, either within-house, or Scott and I have a network to management companies all across the country, literally as far as Hawaii and Alaska. So we can't figure it out. We can hit the internet in our chat room, and we can find an answer. So don't feel you have to reinvent the wheel. Listen to your manager and use your manager as an asset. Vendors, which is the second one. This is really interesting, and I think that we as managers see of this more than you do. That your vendors know more about you than you think. They know how much money you have. They may not have the dollar amount, but they know if you're broke or not. They know if your board's any good. They know if you can make a decision. They know if you're thinking about changing vendors. They know all of this because the owners talk to them. So, and then the vendors talk to us. So we sometimes find, I'll have a vendor, the managers here will have a vendor approach and they'll say, well, I'm working with another community association, and they're very unhappy with their pool company. And they say, do you know a pool company that the landscaping company, can recommend to this board of directors to deal with? Because maybe we don't manage the association. So they talk to each other. And they listen. The vendors really do. So when you're talking to your vendors, treat them kindly, because they will be very good. One of those things, they will be very good to you if you treat them kindly. They do a lot of work for you. They're people who do something that most vendors won't do, and that's work with community associations. We deal with a lot of companies who like to deal with the human part of this business. It's a lot more difficult for these landscapers to deal with an owner who comes out and says, I want that shrub cut to here, and the next owner says, don't you dare cut that shrub because I've been nourishing that for 2 years. How are they going to deal with it? Most landscapers say, forget it, I'm going to work with office buildings and hotels. But we've got this strange group of vendors who absolutely thrive on this. They thrive on this. So remember that what they are doing something for you because they're representing you as they're dealing with the owners. But if you treat them as in a not a professional way, if you ask them to do things all the time for free that's not in their contract, you may lose them. That's one example. Or if you're not straight with them, if you're unhappy with something and you let everybody know but the vendor, yeah, that's not going to work. We can tell the vendor if you don't want to, but you do need to be aware of your vendors. Listen to them, because a lot of times they'll give you good feedback, but also talk to them. Your auditor. Now, you've probably never met your auditor, but we have, some of you do still have audits and reviews, and although audits are a lot more expensive than they used to be, many associations have them because they're required to. They've got documents requiring them to. And really for an large association, I think it's a good idea to have an audit at least every couple of years. Your auditor finds all kinds of things, and many times they see something that is a recommendation to you, and if they do make a recommendation, which would be through us, follow that. Generally, you don't have too much because we keep our books really, really well, and our books are organized. So when an auditor comes through, he really knows where they stand. But sometimes an auditor will pick up on something that we don't know about. It was kind of interesting. It was several years ago. We were managing this community association. We had just taken it over from another company, and they were audited. And actually, I was the manager. We hadn't had it too long. And he says, well, where's this $6,000? And I said, well, what are you talking about? Everything's there. And he said, no. He said, there was some evidence in here that the board of directors had a separate bank account for $6,000. It had about $6,000 in it, and it was for the clubhouse. Whenever anybody rented the clubhouse, the money went into this little fund. And then when they felt like doing something at the clubhouse, they just tapped into the fund, and they thought this was this really neat thing to do. Well, it wasn't, because some of the money was potentially taxable, which, yeah, actually potentially taxable because income to the clubhouse. And also, you have this whole, you know, like the other set of books, you've got like $6,000 that nobody's accountable for. We didn't know about it. We're producing a financial statement that isn't correct because we didn't know about this money. So, of course, I went to the board of directors and I said, well, the auditor said, oh, this is kind of crazy, but the auditor says you've got about $6,000. He's seeing some evidence of this, and it must have been a receipt or something weird. I don't recall how we could have found it. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, wait, we've had this for 10 years. And I said, oh, my goodness. So, of course, we encouraged them to give that to us, and then there was now a paper trail. Who has the $6,000? Well, one of the people is a former board member. She still has signature. Yeah, and then, of course, I still do, and there's one other board member. We said, oh, my goodness. So little things like that. Social, that's another one. We all like to have a little social fund. And so we have, and everybody, you know, you have something, and so everybody maybe contributes $10, and then you have a social activity. And you have money left over, and they say, oh, well, we'll just hold on to it, and then we have that much more money the next time. And so the board member holds on to that. And then 2 years later, somebody remembers it, and they say, oh, where is it? And they say, oh, I don't know, because she moved away. You know? And, you know, it's all this. And nobody's necessarily being dishonest. They just forget. So just remember those things. Listen to your auditor and your attorney. We will find an attorney for you. The ones we work with specialize in community association business. Not all association, or rather not all attorneys work with community associations. So they understand the paperwork, they understand the documents, they understand the law. These are good, you know, these are professional attorneys. They don't get the people part all the time. They don't get the dynamics of a volunteer board of directors that's accountable to its neighbors. That kind of thing is something that they're lacking. So when we work with attorneys, particularly when we're seeking advice on behalf of a board of directors, we want somebody who has that practical side. He'll say, this is the law, but let me tell you from a practical standpoint as well. Do they really need to go down this avenue? We've talked before about the business judgment rule. They'll say a lot of times, well, we have a situation, for example, where, and it's actually, it was over at your place, where several years ago the governing documents only permitted the association to increase the fees, I think it was by 10% a year. And the fees had not been had not increased for several years, and the association was really having a tough time paying its bills. So, and they didn't have a board. In essence, they didn't have a board for a couple of years. It just kind of died out. And so the manager was holding the place together, and then finally they were able to have an election, get a quorum so they could have a board back on. And they said, oh my goodness, look at this. We're in a wreck, got to have an increase. 10% isn't going to grab it. So the manager said, well, how about increasing it 10, what would it be if we had increased every year by 10%? And they said, well, that would bring it up to something where they would have enough money in to be able to pay their bills. So we wondered whether that was reasonable. We thought it was reasonable as a management company, and we weren't too sure, so we consulted with an attorney, and he said, well, that's actually the math works. He read the documents. He said, yes, that's okay. And he said, then that makes good business sense. The board of directors has to bring the fees up enough so that it can pay its bills. These are not bills that they can avoid. And so we were able to do that. Whereas somebody else might have said, oops, it says 10%, and he would have just not realized that you have to be very kind of open when you're looking at the governing documents for associations. And again, don't hesitate to check an attorney or ask us to check with an attorney if you do have a question. As you know, we're not attorneys. We have a lot of experience with this stuff, but we can't give you legal advice. We can give you practical advice, but not the legal advice. So all of these are sources for you as well as for us. The Tennessee Condominium Act. Just quickly, this is telling you what I'm going to tell you. Tennessee Condominium Act became effective in January of 2009. And the part that pertains to existing condominiums has to do with disclosure. And that's why I wanted to bring that up today, because I think this is a good model for anybody. As I mentioned, one of the things that it requires is that you tell owners that you share the minutes. Those are the minutes. Those are the people writing minutes. All right. Another thing that they require is that if you are asked, that you tell the owner what your insurance coverage is. Another one is the reserves. What are your reserves? That's what this one, that's a watch. I think it's a watch around some dollars. I thought it was kind of a neat image. What's the other one up there? Oh, the other one is the balance sheet. The Condominium Act requires that you tell owners, that actually lists about 10 things, mainly how much money you have, which is your balance sheet, your latest financial statement, which shows you how you're spending your money, They may ask for more detailed information, which could include bank statements, although tend not to have to give those. The delinquency information. You don't have to say who's delinquent, but a person in a condominium, an owner or someone who's potentially interested in the community can ask you what the delinquency situation is as a dollar amount, the number of owners, and in its relation to the budget as a percentage. What's percentage? 5% of the people are delinquent. It represents 5% of our budget. That's the kind of answer. Required for condominiums if asked. And the last thing down there is whether there's any legal activity. If you're in a lawsuit where you think the association is going to be in some money, or you think that your reputation as an association could be affected, particularly in a negative way, it's a good idea to share as much as you can with that. Now, condominiums will be required to state that there is a lawsuit. They won't necessarily have to be, they're not required to say what it is, because you don't want to jeopardize the association's position in the suit. But that's something, if the association's involved, we as a management company may have to disclose that. And certainly, if you have an owner who says, hey, I heard that the association's being sued, you as a board member have to decide, am I going to lie? Or am I going to say, well, we have coverage for that. The association's being sued, but the individual owners, board members, are not being sued. It doesn't jeopardize us, and we do have counsel, which was assigned by the insurance company that the association has. See how you can handle that. But it's a good idea to think that in some states, you have to pretty much tell owners everything. You can't have a meeting in private. You can't talk about business outside of a formal setting with notice, giving owners an opportunity. So you have a very, very high standard in other states, which in some cases I think is too much. But I think certainly as a base that these are things that you should be aware of if somebody asks you, that you consider. And it may be that you want to do it in an informal basis. We have one association where we have to direct any inquiries to a board member. And then the board member will literally talk to that person, I think, to make sure that, because they are involved in a lawsuit actually, to make sure that the owner is indeed what information they need, and then giving them what they need to know without jeopardizing the association's position in the suit. Because apparently the financial situation looking at the books will help tell you about the suit. It's kind of one of those deals. You have to be careful, but just knowing that those standards are out there, again, I think is helpful and can be kind of a role. Whatever we do, we try to, we don't say, oh, this is the standard, we're going to stay down here. It's like you with your neighborhood. You want it to be better. Well, as your management company, we want you to meet a high standard as board members, and certainly in the way that you interrelate with your other owners. Ongoing communication. The budget letter, a very, very good opportunity to communicate with your owners. I'm a great believer in budget letters. We can write them for you. I'm a believer in the president doing it. When I was on the board of directors, and even when I was on budget committees, I always did the budget letter, because there again, it's that little, first of all, you can say we. We've been working with this. We know our fees have been, pretty steady for a couple of years, but now we have been looking at this, and we have discovered that there is no choice, that we will have to increase our fees $3 a month, or whatever it is, and this is why. But have a budget letter. Have something that goes out with that budget every year, even if there is no change in the budget. I can't emphasize that enough. Don't, if they're getting a budget, there again, the expectation. If your owners are used to getting a budget every year and always has a letter, they'll read the letter. If they only get it when there's bad news, oh, it's not good. They kind of dread it and maybe put it in a corner and not read it, or whatever people do with bad news. But encourage that communicating the good and the bad sometimes. Broadcast emails, as you know, we use those all the time. Feel free to use them. It is just that quick to get out a quick broadcast message to remind everybody that the garage sale is tomorrow. That's okay. We can do that. Don't think, oh, that's going to be this big deal. It isn't. I mean, the assistants here, right, Teresa and everybody else, it's not a deal at all. So use those broadcast messages. I don't know if I've mentioned, but we've had a couple lost pets, and I think the record's about 10 minutes for matching an owner with a lost pet. Isn't that about right? 10? Yeah. So we've done that several times. So use this great way to communicate. Social events. Have social events. You may not have a clubhouse, but maybe make I've said this before, your annual meeting. Maybe you have mothers getting together and just put in a newsletter. Well, there's some women who have small children and they're kind of trying to get together, and maybe go over to what's that called, Jamboree, and we're all going to do that, and then have lunch afterwards. Would anybody like to do it? Something social. It doesn't have to be a great big party at night. Just something to, again, get people to know each other, get that sense of neighborhood back. We're losing that. Neighborhoods are not what they were, say, when a lot of us were growing up. try to bring that back. Remember the community part and community association. Community outreach. There are several communities. I don't see it so much in Nashville, but certainly on a national level, there have been some communities that have worked as a community to go out and help people in need. They have organized groups that have, say, gone to places like Second Harvest to serve food. They have an opportunity on Fridays where they have lunches that are prepared by budding chefs. They're going to some culinary school, and they prepare really nice meals, and all the meals are served by volunteers. So there are groups that do that. And you always think, oh, I'll do that through my church. Why not your neighborhood? Why not say, hey, we have a particular charity, or there's a clothing drive down the street, and you say, well, we'd like to have some people in our community represented. Anybody interested? It's community outreach. So, and that gets you known in your community too. Again, it's that image, that really positive image that you want people to have of your community. You want people to live there. You want people to say, oh yeah, I heard of that place. They're the ones who always do such and such. Or whenever there's a race, you always see them with a little table serving water or something like that. Surveys. I didn't give you a handout on surveys. They're interesting. I will just say briefly because I don't want to go over time. But surveys can be really good. You need to be careful in the way that you phrase your questions. Know what you want, not know what answers you want. Know what information you want from your survey. I mean, I think there are probably books written on how to put together surveys. But we can help you with that. We've got some good material and guidelines for doing a survey. If you conduct a survey, if you do it at a board meeting, or you do it by mail, or you do it by email, be sure that the owners know that it's a survey. You are asking for their opinion. They are not making the decisions. Thank you very much. We are thinking of expanding our landscaping contract this year. And we want to know what your opinion is about shrub cutting. We want to know if we should continue to have the shrubs cut twice a year, or whether we should have them cut 3 times a year. What is your opinion? The board will decide, okay? Don't make them think that if you decided to stick with 2 cuttings and everybody else said 3, that they made the decision and you went against their decision. So always make that clear in your survey. You're asking surveys for an opinion, but so that you have input that will help you make your decision as a board of directors. Newsletters, I think we've kind of beaten that to death, but they are ongoing. Do try to do a couple a year. Somebody can throw something together for you. It doesn't have to be fancy. Oh, I don't have enough for a newsletter. If you have enough to fill a page, that's fine. Split it in half, get some pictures in there, and get it out there, just so that people have something to look at. Just quickly, newsletters. This, and I don't know if that's very readable, but does need to be news, not just rules all the time, not just don't do this, don't do that. Think of your audience, putting in some practical information. One that's a reminder, and you can do this in homes too, a reminder if you have crawl space to be sure to close your crawl space openings in sometime around November. Although I kind of like them closed. You can't close them all the time, but there are always skunks and everything get in there. But how do you do that? Maybe there are some tips to do that. Covering the outside faucets. Did you know? It could be that there's a store nearby that you just say, well, you can go to, you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and you can pick up one of these styrofoam things. We have learned that if you wrap it with newspaper first and, I knew it was dry. And wrap it with newspaper and then put the thing over. That works better. Well, you think everybody knows that. Not everybody knows that. So that's the kind of thing you could put into the newsletter. Be positive. We have some examples in there. You can say something in a positive way and a negative way. Try to keep it a positive way. Don't say don't. Try instead to avoid the negative. Space. Don't be afraid of space. You don't have enough for the newsletter. That's okay. It's not a newspaper. Space is good because people are going to look at it really quickly. They may toss it right away. So it's that, the quick image. Don't do long paragraphs, just like your emails. Don't do long paragraphs. Short paragraphs. Well, you think, oh, this is all one subject. That's okay. This is not school. You want them to read it. So cut it up into small paragraphs. You can have a paragraph that's 1 sentence. You want it to punch so they can read it fast. And there again, emphasizing the neighborhood and not only what's happening in your community, but what's happening in the general area. If you know about maybe there's a special reading program at the library for children on Tuesdays, they can put that in. Did you know that there's a reading program? And that a lot of the mothers are going to get together and have tea or something after the reading program or something like that. Anything to make it newsy. And I think that's it.